to Horror Hour.
We all go a little mad sometimes. Get you. Here's Johnny.
All right. Hello and welcome to the Horror Hour, a place we discuss, we debate, we disagree on all things horror. I'm one of the co-hosts here, Yutaka. Hello. And today I am actually joined by my fellow co-host, Liam.
Good day, Governor.
Oof, I don't know on that one. And on today's episode, we are actually joining forces with Gaily Dreadful to spotlight efforts in raising money for the Trans Law Center through the Gaily Helpful fundraiser that he's doing for this year. To do this, we're actually joined by two previous guests who we absolutely adore to discuss trans representation in the horror community and just cinema in general, where it has been in the past, present, and where we hope to see it in the future. So please join me in welcoming Mick Douche.
Hey, everybody.
And Miss Toto.
Hello.
And so the first film we're going to start to talk about is Psycho. So, and this goes all the way back to 1960s. Now, also, if there are other films, which Mick just brought up a really good one that I kind of want to talk about, let's just bring them up. But, you know, Psycho, it still is considered a classic, but it's slightly problematic. Thoughts?
You know, for me, as a younger person watching it, I didn't understand why it was problematic. Like, I feel like as we've gotten older and like understand a lot more, like as because I probably watched it when I was like 10, and I was like, oh, I understand why this is supposed to be like a scary movie, but that like the problematicness of it wasn't what stuck out to me. It was more so like the shower scene, like the iconic shower scene, et cetera, et cetera. Like those are the things that stuck out to me. But now as an adult, like going back to rewatch it, I'm like, oh, maybe this isn't the same movie that I thought it was. But yeah, that was my like initial thoughts upon watching it. But I feel like people probably have a similar experience. Like when they're watching it the first time as a younger person in a different time period, we're like, oh, that's why this movie is revered as a classic. But we've learned a lot more now and can like revise those thoughts and feelings. And same thing with like we'll get there to Sleepaway Camp, but like it's reviewed as a classic. But then as an adult watching it for the first time, I was like, I don't know about this, you know.
It's completely different. I completely agree, because I do remember watching these back you know, when I was younger, didn't know any better. And more so, I think with Sleepaway Camp, I really didn't realize how, I mean, yeah, there were some things about that whole movie. Now, as an adult, I'm like, I appreciate it from what it was, but I recognize that there are just some things that, you know, you couldn't do nowadays, and you shouldn't, because the message that it sends is, I mean, it's not good. Definitely not for the trans community or mental health in general.
And I think that's my thing with Psycho is I guess I never really saw it as super transphobic because they lean so heavily on the mental health component, that this man is very much a man, identifies as a man, believes he's a man, except he has mommy issues and mental health problems.
Right.
And so for me, my thing, like my mother has a ton of severe mental illnesses and is like disabled as a result. So like with her having dissociative identity disorder, my problem was always more so how they're portraying these people who have like fractured personality problems. And how that kind of built up, because at the end of the day, that character knows he's not his mother when he's not in that altered state. And so that to me, I think is something that always made a distinction. And some of the other films don't have as much of that like mental health snap component, which makes them a lot more of a problem for me in the transphobia sense.
Yeah, I think it is very, I don't think the film in itself set out, even looking back at it from current day mindset, I don't think the film ever is like this is what's bad. I think it's more the film is weaponized by people who are against it, and they try and use the film as like, well, no, because these things, well, no, it doesn't happen.
this is a film. This is make-believe. These things don't happen. Stop trying to say that it does. And I don't think you're ever really clicking onto it until you get older, until you hear and see things online, and then you're like, oh, wait there. Like, people are saying this in an effort to try and cause an issue. And it's not an issue. It's you're making an issue on purpose. And I think that's with this one, I think that's the main problem with Psycho. It's the what you will use. Is it conservatives you would call them over your side?
Yes, we would call them conservatives.
It's the conservatives of the world that I would call them a Tory cunt. You would call them a conservative.
This is true.
It's them, that kind of person, isn't it? Really, they're the ones that are making the issue.
Also, now that I'm thinking about it, I wasn't even thinking about it from like the mental snap of him thinking that he is his mother. I thought it was like some sort of fetish, and I've been exposed to it since I was a kid. And I never thought it was like him performing as his mother, like being his mother, which is now tapping into like more gender stuff. I was like, oh, he's in a costume because he's dressing up as his mom for some fetish or something like that. Like now that we're talking about it, I was like, my mind went to drag as a kid versus like, oh, he's like acting as his mother in this moment mentally. And that probably because I was 10 and don't understand the complexities of like mental issues. But I think that's why it didn't bother me. I was like, oh, he's just dressing up like his dead mom. Like, that's not as bad. But again, it's like there are things that we can take away from it that still would make it an iconic film, but also learning like as like film critics or people making films, it's like, okay, well, we're not going to make this mistake again, and we're not going to continue to making like trans people be villainous murderers or you know what I mean, like that, because
exactly
that's been like the thing in a lot of films with history. It's like not just trans people, but like LGBT people in general are usually the villain of some sort. And like we kind of touched on this before we started recording, but I think it's super cool that a lot of trans people are getting opportunities in film recently. Like especially I watched Veneno, if anyone watched Veneno. So good. So the actress, there was one of the actresses, she was like the interviewer. I saw her on another Spanish show, and her being trans wasn't even a plot point or anything until like episode 6, where she like loosely brings it up. But it was like a 2-minute segment, like because it was about identity. Because the boy asked like, how long have you been? I think her name is Micah. And then she like glips over it. She's like, well, how long have you been Chris? And I was like, for me, I was like, this is so cool. It took us 7 episodes. Like if I didn't know this actress was trans or any of that, like it wasn't a plot point. It wasn't a part of the storyline. And I think that's important to notice that things are happening like that, because it shouldn't be a plot point unless it's like that's part of the storyline. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a part of the storyline, because like LGBTQ plus struggles don't need to be in the forefront of every
No.
What about Celebration?
And you can cast trans actors for non-trans roles. Like people have been casting cis het people for like the queer role for centuries. Honestly, centuries. Like I don't know why you can't do it the other way. Right. And the thing is too is like I personally like to imagine that like a lot of those like pants roles in opera were actually being played by little trans men, because it was one of the few places where they could be perfectly acceptable to be their full self in the professional workplace. So I like to imagine that in like the 1400s, we have little trans men running around in the opera.
I love that. But we'll move to Sleepaway Camp, because that's kind of like the more, again, egregious, I still love it. Yes. Yeah, thank you. I still enjoy it for what it was back in the day, but it was definitely, I look at it now and, the shock and awe is supposed to be, oh my God, this is a trans person that's doing this, or like, but then also it, the whole, I believe it was the mother who was just couldn't cope and then forced that instead of letting just
it was the
them
aunt.
be.
I mean, and
the
that's
aunt, thank you.
That's like what I was telling you with Homicidal. There's this weird theme of like these characters are messed up because the family abused them, and that's why they present this way. because Homicidal has that same theme, and that, I mean, predated Sleepaway Camp, but I even think about, okay, it's there's the one Frankenstein movie where Frankenstein puts his assistant in the body of his lover. Do you know what I'm talking about? That's another one from like the 70s. I watch a lot of old shows, in part because that's what I watch on Shudder. I'm like weird in the deep old.
Oh, here we do watch way too much Shudder, but I'm gonna have to look that one up. But that, I mean, that's essentially, that is the problem with a lot of these older films.
Frankenstein created a woman. Because I knew the title was very like.
Just get. I don't even have my pen.
I'll message it to you. I'll remember that because that sounds interesting. Good. I want to see that, but because I'm kind of curious. But yeah, I mean, that's the big thing, is that they're just villainized, and I just, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, queer people can be villains, but I don't think that shouldn't be part of like the horrors because they are queer or they are trans, you know.
It's been a while since I watched Sleepaway Camp, and weren't the scenes where they do the whole trans thing just like completely unnecessary throwaways?
Yeah. So it's like I just watched it. I thought I'd watched it. Turns out I hadn't watched it because I put it on and I was like, oh, clearly I've just seen clips of this, because there's like a big chunks of this I like can't remember ever seeing. And I was watching it and I was like, oh, you know what? Like I can see why this is kind of like a cult thing. Like it's a more camp version of like Friday the 13th and things like that. Like all like the girl bunk with them all bit with that like one that's like, oh look, she's got her big boobs, and she's got no boobs, but they're all just get, oh, she's got big boobs now, and like she's like strutting around like that, and I was like, oh, this is quite camp. And then and then that happens at the end, and it's just, it's not needed. She could have just been pissed off because she watched her father and brother die, and then just snapped a little bit and killed people who were nasty to her. It didn't need the added thing.
Yeah, like I don't think that whole ending was necessary at all. Like,
no.
And as someone, because I didn't know anything about it until I got Shudder, and I was like going through like the classics section. I'm like just watching all of them because I had nothing else to fucking do. So I was like, oh, Sleepaway Camp, it's like high rated, whatever, it looks cute, and get through the film, and it's like the last section to where it's like not a part of the plot. So like it's like for shock value, but like not in a pleasant way. And not in like a more uncomfortable way where it's like supposed to make you feel uncomfortable. Like, and maybe that happens for like, I guess, straight people who don't even know that trans people exist. But like for me, I'm like, okay, I know plenty of girls with dicks, so this is not surprising to me. What's more surprising is that it's a child's body on TV. That is weird. Not seeing a girl with a dick, I'm like, okay, there are lots of girls with dicks. So I feel like there is a sort of shock value that exists, I guess, for people who feel like that is shocking. Like a trans person is shocking, but again, it doesn't need to happen. Like making trans people, like that's that the plot point is about her being a murderer because of the family trauma, which then was happening because she's trans or something like that. And it's like, none of that is necessary. Trauma doesn't create a trans person.
Correct.
This is a slightly more general vilification of like transgender people. Did you guys ever see the show Happy with the guy who played Stabler from Law and Order SVU? With like the weird floaty unicorn? That's one where I really, really enjoyed it until they felt like making an entire episode about like one of the villain's bodies. And it was very, very transphobic in the way it plays out, and it's gross. And then when I actually even tried to put reviews online about it, the like crazy onslaught of like people who were defending this type of behavior and this film and everything, well, TV show and everything was insane. And literally all I said was, it's really great, it's really funny, but it's transphobic. And boy, the hate mail that ensued on like for posting one review over a show. So it's like, hopefully people are more receptive to it. And I think that's part of my fear with they, them, is even though we have some trans folks in there, there is an awful lot of people who aren't trans and aren't queer at all involved in this. And I can't help but feel like capitalizing on the horror that is conversion therapy, and when it's not driven entirely by the folks who suffer at the hands of it, makes me uncomfortable. And just knowing enough about corporations, knowing that the ultimate people taking that money are not going to be queer people who have been at all affected, bothers me. And so I would like to see them do a nice big fat donation somewhere, because they're about to take a minority's trauma and make money off it.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm excited but wary of them. I don't want to be like outright like, oh, this is going to be great. This is going to like give everyone the representation they want and need. We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
We hope.
Right.
I mean,
I feel like that's what we do quite a lot.
They're not releasing it during Pride Month. So is that a warning?
Maybe it just feels like, because it might not. I was thinking if they release it during Pride Month, it might be oversaturation. It would get lost in the shuffle.
That's a good point.
Much going on. But you're right, to the point of like, I don't understand. This has been the conversation that's happened so many times, time and time again. It's like, if you're telling the story of a marginalized group, how about you have those people in on it? Like, at least in the writing room, like if they're not the director or something, like bring them in for a reading and feedback and stuff. And I mean, who's to say that hasn't happened? But I'm excited to see, I'm excited to see the movie and see what happens, because I also really like the name of it, because it's like, punny. It's punny, it's fun. But I want to see how they like do it, because we're in 2022 now. There's no need to like be doing offensive stories anymore, like for shock value, especially when it has to do with like queer trauma. So I'm interested.
And I am just also nervous because of the political situation, because there's what they do and then there's what people take.
Right.
And obviously they can't control what people take, but boy, I hope if they see it being taken that way, that they're willing to put down the legwork to try to help.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it kind of goes like that. There are like 4 queer stories they tell you. And one is like the woman who has to overcome misogyny, which is not really queer, but they kind of make it queer, like Mulan. And then, I mean, yeah, it's like a big thing. Like, and even, okay. So something that trans mass guys do that is, if kind of a fascinating cultural trend, is we have shot day playlists. And the number of people who have "I'll make a man out of you" on their shot day playlist is hilarious.
That is shot day playlist.
Yeah, because it's like a whole ritual. Yeah, you got to go through it once a week, so you better make it something worth doing.
Wow.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then you get into the idea of like the villain, the trans person's the villain, and then you get into the idea that like all queer stories are this horrible, like not celebratory situation, and that's like the boys don't cry for me. Is I'm worried that even if they them isn't vilifying a trans person, are we going to cross into this like they them, they're the victims, like they that like boys don't cry, they're victims, they're just trauma. So I'm hoping they can bring some light into it too, like let the characters have some moments that aren't just sheer horror,
right?
Because I mean, conversion therapy is a horror in itself, so if it's just
absolutely
horror, it's a little much.
I mean, fingers crossed they're taking it as a way of shining a light on it, showing how shit it is, and being like, we can stop this. That's what we can hope.
We'll see. Yeah, you were right though, Vic. It's like how they want it to be perceived may not be the way that it will be perceived. So it's just up to waiting till it comes out. But like that makes me think like one of my favorite recent horror movies that came out, which is queer, was Midnight Kiss. And I believe it's on
Hulu. Yes, on Hulu's Into the Dark. Yeah,
so Chester Lockhart's in it. But it's not about queer trauma, but it's like very queer. And it's like funny, campy horror, like and it doesn't have to do with like conversion therapy or family traumas or like the killer is just like a jealous boyfriend. And I'm like, okay, Give me something simple. He's jealous.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
he doesn't have family trauma from being gay or any of that. It's just like that. It's nice, simple, and clean. And I'm not saying every like horror film has to be that, but I think it's refreshing to see a queer horror film that is not focused on that.
Oh, I loved that film too.
You know,
Did you all ever see But I'm a Cheerleader?
upset.
Yes.
In a dream world, they them is just a serial killer dropped into But I'm a Cheerleader.
That'd be
Let's
fine.
just tell them
I'd be
remake
okay
this
with
movie
that.
right now.
Okay,
That's
yeah,
all we
no.
can hope for.
But I'm a Cheerleader was the first queer film I ever saw as a teenager, and it will always hold so much meaning to me. It's like
Debs is another one right there with it if you've never seen Debs.
I have. I've seen the
Okay.
that and like the original short they had based off of.
Oh yeah.
But I love But I'm a Cheerleader. So if this was that, but horror, okay, I'm down. I would be
Definitely
like,
down.
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think recently, because behind me, I have a promotional one from Bit.
I did really like that one.
And I really, really enjoyed Bit. The actress, I can't.
Natalie
blanking on her name.
Maines.
There we go. Already knew who she was because I also watched. I was one of the only people that watched and enjoyed Supergirl.
Same.
So I like. So Yutaka obviously put it on this list for this, and I was like, "Oh, this will be fun." Did not expect to enjoy it as much as I did. Because I like the vampire things like a bit
Overplayed.
over and done within it. Yeah, like it's everything's vampires. But it was such a refreshing take on it. So I was just oh, this is great. And then it was another example of you had a trans actress who, well, that wasn't, there was like, obviously it was just a very small part near the end,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't
the focal point.
Yeah, it was never the focal point. It was like when they went to bring her in and she just quickly said, because they were like, you can't have like this is the main rule, we don't turn men, and she just went, well, no, never a thought, and then just went on with it. And I was like, there we go, that's what we need. And I was like, this is great, this is representation where it works, and it isn't ham-fisted.
Right.
No, well, this makes me think of, honestly, it's funny that it took the most recent Scream film, and I have to mention Jasmin Savoy Brown. I will always. But the fact that we had a queer person of color, sorry, spoilers, but live, also just be a really badass character and actually have depth, and just was so relatable, and also audiences enjoyed that character, was just so really exciting to see. I wish it didn't take so long for that, especially in that universe, but I'm also very happy to see how Jasmin just champions queer stories and is like, I'm not going to be just another statistic. You're going to let me survive.
Right. For now.
Oh.
I
Everyone keeps saying that, and it's like breaking my heart.
The Reddit thread that is now deleted, as they do. But yeah, because also that reminds me, because she was also in Yellow Jackets, right?
Yes.
And also played a queer woman in Yellow Jackets.
And Sound of Violence.
And that,
so I'm like, if this is your bit, I'm here for it. You can be the queer Black girl of all film if this is going to be your gig, because you're doing a really amazing job at it.
Yep.
Yeah, I want to see more of that. It was well, speaking of queer horror, there are actually several queer horror films that are coming out. Hypochondriac, which it has to deal with like he's bipolar, but also it's taken from the actual writer's own mental breakdown. And so they actually have a very honest way they approach mental health in terms of when you're in that state of crisis, the world you perceive is really not the world around you. and I really enjoyed the way that it blended, but also it showed a loving queer relationship. I was just happy to see that. I was like, I would like to see more of that. I mean, look at everything, everywhere, all at once. Queer Asian storyline.
That was so stressful though. That one needs some trigger warnings going in, and also like, it was a lot.
It made my dad cry, so I couldn't cry while he was sitting there crying. I was like,
it was intense.
I was like, all right, I'll keep it together. But I'm happy that we're seeing more of this moving forward.
Mhm.
So, and I know this went on a whole tangent, but really I just wanted to talk about where I hope to see queer cinema and also queer TV as well. I don't know if any of you have watched the most recent Queer as Folk.
I haven't.
Did you see Death Drop? Did you see Death Drop Gorgeous? Okay, yes. I just wanted to make sure to give that a shot there, because like I know the guys who made that are so nice, and like it's just really like one of those grassroots films.
It is so camp, and I loved the gore they did in it too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god!
I ended up
learning a lot of gore for the budget.
Oh, there you go. I ended up learning about it because Sigourney ended up like a night early to like a gig, and she just walked into a random bar and sat down, and these guys just started chatting with her, and then ended up taking her out for like a whole night on the town, day on the town, and then found out like hours later they made this movie.
That's great.
Oh my god, that's amazing. And then let's see here. What else? Swallowed is coming out, and that's ooh, that was a good one. Also, I do love now that we're starting to also see more nudity. Like they're not shying away from male nudity. Obviously, there's always been women showing their breasts, but it's about time we could start to see some men. Just saying.
Yeah. Get the dick out.
They did in that film, and I mean, the whole premise is just a drug smuggling deal gone wrong.
Yeah,
mixed with body horror. And
we've all been there.
For the drug smuggling gone wrong or the body
horror? Liam, what do you do on your off day?
Regularly trafficking to Mexico.
From the UK.
Just dog paddling.
Yeah. Just keep swimming.
But honestly, I guess what I would like to know, as we're sitting here talking about this, we talk about where we want to see, where we hope it goes, but I'd like to know to you, what are some films that you find are a positive representation of trans or queer culture?
Horror films or just in
I'm
general?
just going to say in general at this point, because I just feel like I always feel horror is queer, but I really just hope that we still see just more queer storylines, because there are plenty out there, like you said, that don't involve trauma, that can just be either it could be a silly rom-com just for the hell of it. I mean, I feel like there are these stories that could be told, and they're not at times. So
yeah, so I feel like Queer as Folk, the new one, so I'm on episode 5. Like I'm in it. That's fun. I haven't watched it, but I'll get there eventually.
I haven't finished.
It's the episode Choke. But like just going down there and like meeting the cast, one of the actresses, like I'm sitting in the hair trailer or whatever, and she opens the door to get her hair done, and I was like, "Hi, Miss Toto, nice to meet you." She was like, "Repeat that." I was like, "Miss Toto?" She's like, "Girl, it's Peroxide." So one of the lead actresses was a drag queen that I knew back in New York City that quit drag to become an actress. And she's a beautiful, sickening trans woman. She's on the new Star Trek that just came out as well. But in the show, she's married to a Black woman. There's just so much diversity. There's Asian people. There's like just people of every color, size. I'm like, this is what I wanted to see. I haven't watched it, so I don't know all the storylines, so I can't. But everyone that I've heard it from says it's really good. So that I'm excited to see it, especially in comparison to the old one, which was super whitewashed.
That's
and
true.
like very problematic with the whole daddy groomer thing. And like, yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah,
Mhm.
no, that. Oh.
that I hope they remedy with the new one.
The original Queer as Folks, like the original L Word, where it was a sign of the times, and it was not a very healthy time for anybody.
Right. Like I remember watching it when I was growing up, like late at night on HBO at my grandma's house. And I was like, if this is what being gay is like, I don't need it.
I mean, but that's like the L Word too. I tried to be so hard to be a lipstick lesbian because I was convinced masculinity was worthless and that trans men were like that character Max in it. Because that's what they showed me for representation.
And that's what's scary, because I'm like, the only things that I pulled from that I really resonated with was going to the clubs. I was like, I want to go to Babylon. That looks sickening. But that also like led me to the path of like watching Party Monster and understanding club kid culture. So like that's something good that got out of it. But like everything else, I'm like, none of it was really sitting with me. I was like, I don't know if being gay is for me. If this is what it's like, maybe I'm not trying to do this.
Yeah.
And what I got out of it is British TV is still better. So
Okay. I think
but sorry, can I just say the actress that you just is it
Jessie James.
Jessie James. Oh my god, I love her.
I adore them.
I'm obsessed with Big Sky.
Oh yeah, she was in that too. But like literally, when I say like I was friends with this performer, like we were mutual, like we hung out, and she like just disappeared one day. And then it literally walks in the trailer and was like, girl, it's peroxide. I said, what the fuck have you been up to? You like dropped off the face of the earth, transitioned, and now you're a famous actress. Love.
I guess I need to finish.
So amazing.
It's the shooter storyline that is still kind of for me. I'm like, there's just so much of that in the news.
It's episode 1 of that.
That was, I mean, that's why for me, I was like, this is rough. But
did they give a trigger warning?
They did. Okay. And I knew that going in, but then I was like, I'm gonna have to sit this one out for a little bit and like maybe not watch the news. And then because again, I do love them. I love a lot of the cast.
Yeah.
And again, it's in New Orleans and the cast is hot. And
so hot.
And like you said, it's not whitewashed. It's
no, not at all.
And we've got disabled actors. I don't know. There's just, again, we're all not the same. So I really love seeing that. And I know that sounds corny, but it's just nice to feel like when you're looking at the screen that maybe you could see yourself.
Yeah.
What is also really cool about Queer as Folk is that a lot of queer people were hired for like behind the scenes work as well. Like a lot of the PAs were like local drag queens that I'm friends with. The set was built by like a couple of my chokehold performers that I wrestle with. And they hired them to do like art installations and building a lot of the set. So it's like people were like the New Orleans family that exists there of queer people was like really taken care of and like listened to as far as what this should look like to represent New Orleans. Cause like that's the setting. You want it to be authentic to New Orleans because like New Orleans has a personality and you're not going to get that unless you have New Orleans people involved.
Well, now I have a better appreciation. That makes me just love the show even more. Really do need to dive back in then because
I need to watch it, period.
on the British TV is better. I don't mean to backtrack, but on the British TV is better. I've seen Naked Attraction. So yes, British TV is better.
Don't you come for Naked Attraction.
It's so great to watch. It's like the best late night trash.
It's amazing.
That could never fly here. It's a shame.
I have never felt more pride in seeing my friend's penis and then finding out that after he didn't get picked, he went and slept with the other person who did get picked.
I love.
Just what if that isn't just a big, huge representation?
All the Americans going on YouTube trying to watch this,
right?
And realizing they can't because it has full frontal everybody nudity.
Everyone's naked.
So, so we heard Miss Toto's pick. I would like to know then, Mick, what is a good film TV series, just
It's actually a video game.
oh,
My
okay.
absolute favorite is in Dragon Age Inquisition, when there's a trans mask character who's actually an ancillary character, but you can have like a little conversation when your character kind of realizes this is not a cisgender man. Because you kind of wonder, because you can tell the voice doesn't present as typically masculine.
Mhm.
And so there's actually a moment where the character introduces it in the conversation themselves when you're asking about their history and their life as a mercenary. And then at one point, it gives you an opportunity to ask another character about it. Another character's like, that's really not your business type of a response. And so I really like that, because this character, it's not like the crux of the film, but like their presence is just there. And I mean, BioWare in general, as like a video game manufacturer, has always done a good job doing like choose your own adventure, including queer people. And so this is just one more element.
I love that.
It's not Star Wars. I can't play it. I'm sorry.
Mm.
If it doesn't tell us what button to press, I just don't know.
Absolutely no. Don't you dare! Don't
I just
bring
play
that
fighting
fandom
game
here.
if I go in.
Oh no.
Mm-mm.
You and
So-
Sigourney can play Sonic together.
So-
Literally, that's my limit.
Oh my goodness. So Liam, how about you? What's been one as of recent?
Well, I mean, we've just been raving and reviewed one that's
Spoiler,
Quite-
but yes.
quite on the spectrum of queer.
Yes.
So,
Revealer.
Revealer. I should know it. We've said it about 40 times. That is the Shudder exclusive that we have been raving about nonstop, because it was just great to watch.
80s hair
So that's a
metal,
horror
queer,
one. Exactly.
sex positive.
And it has someone from Chicago in it as well. I think it's set in Chicago as well.
1980 Chicago.
Yeah. She's
Helena
a burlesque
Handbasket.
performer.
Helena Handbasket.
She's the star of this new Shudder film.
Gag.
Yeah, she's
Um,
got like, that dance sequence.
Very good dance sequence. The music really makes it, and the lighting, and the delightful silver bikini swimsuit thing. I don't know what it is. It's all lots of straps and stuff.
It's 80s. That's
Yeah,
all.
it's 80s. 80s and it's silver. But yeah, that's great. If we're talking about obviously queer representation in general, Fire Island. That just came out
That
and
was gonna be
great.
mine.
Yeah.
I'm quite looking forward to that Dope Queen as well.
I don't know about that one at all.
Dope Queens. It's Tracy Lissette. It's also gonna have Kylie Sonique Love in it as well.
Oh, I'm gonna have to look
Mm.
this one up.
That'll be cool.
Okay.
I think it's like
Yeah.
three trans women leading it.
That'll be awesome.
I'm gonna be looking for that one. I'm gonna have to...
I mean, okay, is there like a queer version of the Bechdel test?
Okay,
'Cause
but
this
was the
seems
Bechdel
like-
test like? Was that? I thought it was a joke. I thought it was meant to be a joke, but like people
No,
took it
no,
seriously.
Bechdel test was actually developed by a gender psychologist, like a woman
Okay.
talking about how because it was the Bechdel test, I don't remember all of the steps. So this is my vague, like undergraduate years ago recollection is, are there two women in this film? Do the two
Right.
women have a conversation with each other? Is it about something other than a man? And most American cinema can't pass the test. And it's gotten better in recent years, but at the time she came out with this, which I think was honestly back in like the 90s, they were like, even Disney films can't do it.
I believe that.
I'm sure I've just watched something that took the piss out of that. I'm sure
Oh
it was
my
some sort
God,
of animated
I've-
thing on Netflix, and they were like, and it was like two women arguing, and then they like
Mhm.
stop mid-argument, and they're like, "Shit, are we passing the Bechdel test right now?" And then just get, "No, we're not. Let's talk about this." Stop arguing, have a conversation about something completely different, and then just go back to arguing again.
Yeah.
Dead.
think
And
about-
like
was it
it was a
Inside Job
big
or
deal when one of,
something?
Yeah, I think so. And like one of the Fast and the Furious is they also have a moment where you can tell there's almost like a Bechdel test moment where like they don't say it aloud, but there's like this sudden shift to like, we better have a different conversation right now.
It's like, quick, get that person to talk about something else. It's like Gal Gadot. Quick, get Gal Gadot, like, act. Just act. Get it to sing Imagine.
I forgot part of the test was if there are two women characters, do they both have names? That was part of the test too. Because you might have two women having a conversation, but if it's like an unnamed waitress and your lead, it doesn't count.
Wow. I don't know about the Bechdel test. I'm going to look into this, and now it's going to make me question so many films.
And now I
don't
just
think
want
I
to know
want
if
to
there's a
look
queer
into it.
version. Oh, go ahead, Liam. Sorry.
No, I don't think I want to look into it. I think it'll start destroying things for us.
Let's make a queer version. I'm gonna start thinking about what that looks like. But
Yeah,
like, I
it's
feel like, well, I was gonna say, I feel like being queer is just such a big thing. So,
Mhm.
but maybe it would be specific to if you call yourself a queer film, are these things at least in there?
Or not in there. Because like
I
we're
like
talking about that
that.
trauma. Like, is there trauma?
Like, is the story, right? Is the story based on trauma? Like
Mhm.
that would be like point one for me.
Yeah.
Jamie Lee Curtis is livid.
Or if it's like a horror film, like is the murderer or the killer or the villain doing this because of trauma? Like even if trauma is not in the film, it's like, is this a cause and effect that you're trying to create?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm all for having a queer murderer, who, like somebody who just happens to be queer. Like, if you want to go kill some people, go for it. And
Right.
Just don't make it because your mom didn't love you.
Right. I just decided I'm gonna write a screenplay about drag queens murdering drag queens.
There you go. I think, okay, this is pre-pandemic. I think someone had like a weird like Chicago local film they did make. I don't think it really got very far, but I think Seashell might have been a part of it. I know Quinn was a part of it.
Oh my God. I remember that someone, there was like a premiere party or something, and I was like,
Yeah.
I just moved here. Like, I don't know these people. I'm not going.
Because it was it was like a year or
watch.
two before the pandemic. And I'm like, I don't remember what fell in your timeline of arriving. Yeah.
oh my
it was
God.
2019. And then there's the other one with Bible Girl.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God. I'm gonna look it up. There's Bible Girls in a horror film.
Stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Y'all, I
so
am
nice
learning.
too.
I
It's one of
would-
those people.
know this. Killer Unicorn,
Oh
I will be watching that later.
boy.
2017. Because I remember them like they were crowdfunding for a while to like, put it on. And it's a bunch of like Brooklyn people, to my understanding. So they were like pushing it out and doing screenings and stuff in Brooklyn. And that was when I was like dabbling within Brooklyn drag a lot. So I like saw it around, but I still didn't watch it. So I should probably do that.
I'm gonna look in. I will.
Tagline: American Psycho, Party Monster, and DJ Steve Aoki all combine for a killer unicorn.
That sounds like fun.
I want to watch that like right now.
I honestly hope that Killer Unicorn is someone who just got tired of like the couples across the bar looking at them wrong.
And that's okay.
Because it just seems with a name like that, that's where it's going.
I feel like it passes the queer Bechdel test. It's fine.
Oh boy.
Oh my gosh.
So I just, the reason that I interrupted to do this is because I've actually donated probably hundreds of hours at this point as like a legal professional to the Transgender Law Center. It's one of my big causes. I have all sorts of lawyers from my law firm who are part of it. And it has a wide variety of programming, but it's all like person of color, Black, Indigenous, person of color led, trans led. And it's really unique because when I talk to the folks at the center, I'm almost always talking to a trans person, which is really unusual for LGBTQ rights organizations, especially in the legal sphere, where queer lawyers are mostly white gay men. And like, no shame to them, like, go for it, guys. But we need to also figure out how we get the other queer people into there. Anyways, what I'm a part of specifically is the inmate programs. So originally what I was doing was responding to inmate letters, where inmates would write a letter, either ask for help or just resources. And we would put together a packet that's basically like here's how you advocate for yourself, and ship it back to them. And now I'm in one that's more of an advocacy group where we get a letter from an inmate. They talk about what they've already done. And then I write a letter to the prison going, by the way, here's all the things the Constitution, laws, and courts have said. Maybe you want to think about this before the inmate does something bigger to make you follow what you're supposed to be doing in the first place. And it's shocking how much one letter from a lawyer makes a difference. And so to me, that's why the Transgender Law Center really matters. It doesn't matter how well informed these inmates were, how much work they did on their end. One letter from a lawyer changes the whole thing. And unfortunately, without groups like the Transgender Law Center, lawyers don't even know where to start to get connected with these inmates. So it's nice to have this group that helps divvy it out and filter out weird requests, because sometimes you get really irrelevant letters that come through. And so there's admin time that they spend that's not even advocating, because they just have to deal with all the bullshit in between.
Boom. That's amazing.
No, that really is.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
Like I just got someone a pat search accommodation, and that was an amazing feeling to know that like now she's not going to have male guards pat search her anymore.
Oh, that's amazing. And
that
that's
really
also
is.
awful that I mean, I shouldn't be shocked that happens, but oh.
Yeah, it took her, she had been trying for over 1.5 years before the Transgender Law Center got involved. So it's one that once we got involved, it's taken maybe 4 months and she's gotten that accommodation.
Also, in the grand scheme of things of life, 4 months is not that long. So that's really fast, I think. Like
it really, no.
In prison years, 4 months is an incredible speed.
Yeah.
That makes me happy to hear. I mean,
great work.
That's yeah. As soon as I saw, honestly, as if I haven't said enough, that I am very fortunate, so I always want to give back, and that's how I ended up coming across Miss Toto, was at the height of BLM, and just using your platform for good, whereas so many have this following and they don't speak out, they're not activists, they're just like I don't know, and it moved me. And then so when I also saw Terry, who has been doing this every year, and he's like, right now, which is true, our trans brothers and sisters are really under attack, more so than I feel like ever. Where I thought we were starting to get some rights, they are just being taken away at an alarming rate. And well, I'm going to say fuck Texas, but and Florida. Sorry.
And Florida.
So just to see that he's, using his platform to help raise money for that cause. And so I just appreciate you all coming on here and just getting to shoot the shit with us, and also Mick, just for explaining more about the Transgendered Law Center, because I think, again, it's amazing. I'm glad that exists, and I just hope more will, hear about it and donate to the cause.
Even if people aren't lawyers, they always can use help, because things like listening to voicemails and then just writing down notes, you don't have to be a lawyer to do it.
There you go.
Wow.
You don't just need the money. You also need the people.
They could absolutely volunteer. We'll put all the links down below and where you can find all that. And again, I just want to say thank you to our guests. Had a really fun time. Almost kind of tearing up just hearing about what Mick told us about. But again, thank you. Until next time. Bye.
Thank you.
You have been listening to the Horror Hour. See you next time.